Artificial intelligence has really profoundly permeated our daily lives, hasn't it? It's transforming everything from the chatbots we interact with online to the promises of self-driving cars.
It absolutely has. And it's often presented as this unstoppable force, a wave of innovation that's just going to uplift humanity entirely.
But what if there's a less visible, maybe more profound story behind this rapid expansion? What if this relentless pursuit of advanced AI carries immense, often hidden costs?
That's exactly what we're diving into today. We're taking a critical look at the aggressive pursuit of artificial general intelligence, or AGI, particularly by Silicon Valley companies.
Our mission really is to unpack what we're calling the empire of AI concept. We want to examine those hidden environmental, social, labor, and even democratic costs that often get overshadowed by the, frankly, immense hype surrounding this technology.
We want to provide you, the listener, with a really comprehensive understanding of what's truly at stake beyond the headlines you might see every day.
We'll be offering some surprising facts and critical insights drawn from quite diverse sources. And here's a crucial point we need to address right from the start, and we'll probably circle back to it throughout this deep dive.
What's the point of that?
Despite the fervent pursuit, the almost religious belief in it sometimes, there is actually no scientific proof that artificial general intelligence is even achievable. None.
That's such a fundamental point. The very foundation of this aggressive push seems based more on a carefully constructed narrative than on solid scientific certainty.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If the science isn't there, what is the real driving force behind all this investment and effort?
And perhaps more importantly, what are the implications of building an entire massive industry on such an unproven theoretical premise?
That's precisely the central question we aim to explore today. And to understand it, I think we need to begin by clarifying what we actually mean when we talk about AI and AGI.
Definitely. Because these terms are often used interchangeably, sometimes quite loosely, and that really contributes to the hype cycle we mentioned.
So let's start with AI. The term artificial intelligence itself as a concept has a really interesting origin story, doesn't it?
It really does. It was coined way back in 1956 by a Dartmouth University assistant professor named John McCarthy.
And his motivation wasn't purely scientific, was it?
Reportedly, no. His motivation was pretty straightforward. He invented the term, apparently to attract more attention and, crucially, more funding for his research work.
That marketing origin actually helps explain quite a lot, like why the definition of AI remains so broad and, frankly, somewhat poorly defined even today.
Exactly. Essentially, AI encompasses this wide array of technologies that simply appear to simulate human behaviors or perform tasks we associate with human intelligence.
This can range from something as basic as, say, a phone assistant like Siri, which fundamentally follows predefined rules and scripts.
Right, all the way to the highly advanced chatbots we interact with now, like ChatGPT, which generate entirely new content based on analyzing vast patterns in data.
But despite their vastly different operational mechanisms, their different scales of resource consumption, and their very different use cases, they all fall under that broad AI umbrella,
Right.
which can be quite confusing for people.
It absolutely can. And then we have AGI, or artificial general intelligence. Now, this is a much more theoretical, you could even say speculative concept.
How is AGI defined then in contrast to that broader AI?
Well, AGI refers to a theoretical AI that is expected to exceed human intelligence in literally every aspect: cognitive ability, learning capacity, problem solving, across incredibly diverse domains.
So it's often used interchangeably with terms like superintelligence or maybe ultra-intelligent machines.
Precisely. It implies a qualitative leap, a fundamental jump beyond current AI capabilities. The idea is that an AGI would possess an intelligence that's fundamentally different and far more versatile.
Meaning it could achieve goals across a huge range of environments and solve complex problems in highly complex settings, far beyond what any human or any current AI system can manage.
That's the theoretical promise, yes. But it's crucial to underscore the theoretical part of that.
You mentioned earlier that there's significant scientific skepticism about AGI. Can you elaborate on that? Because it seems to fly in the face of the public narrative.
It certainly does contrast sharply with the hype. There is indeed significant skepticism surrounding the very possibility of AGI within the actual research community.
How significant are we talking?
Many respected AI researchers, and some estimates suggest this could be as high as 75% of longstanding experts in the field, believe that the necessary techniques to create true AGI do not currently exist.
So it's not just a matter of scaling up current methods. They think something fundamental is missing.
Correct. and its eventual possibility is heavily contested within the scientific community. There are even some philosophical arguments suggesting AGI might be logically impossible.
Logically impossible. How so?
The argument often centers on the idea that all current programming is fundamentally based on existing human conceptual knowledge and predefined logic. Humans provide the framework.
Okay, I think I follow that.
Whereas general intelligence, as we understand it in humans, seems to require the capacity to create genuinely new abstract concepts and adapt to truly novel situations not envisioned in the initial programming.
And the argument is that programming, by its nature, cannot fundamentally implement that kind of emergent, abstract, conceptual creation.
That's one line of reasoning, yes, that there are inherent limitations. Yet, despite this deep scientific contention, this unproven concept of AGI is the engine driving immense capital investment.
It's genuinely fascinating, isn't it? This huge industry, billions upon billions of dollars, chasing something that a majority of experts aren't sure is even possible, let alone imminent.
It leads back to your earlier question. If the science isn't the primary driver, what is? And that points us towards the role of hype in the funding model itself.
So let's talk about that. What if the very engine of AI development, the venture capital model, isn't just leveraging hype, but is fundamentally built on it?
That seems to be a very accurate way to put it. Hype isn't just a byproduct of this industry. It appears to be a fundamental feature of the venture capitalist or VC funding model.
How does that work in practice?
Well, generating immense excitement and painting these sweeping, often utopian visions for future technologies is absolutely central to securing the massive investments VCs are looking for.
They're chasing those huge returns, right? The 10x or even 100x returns on their investment.
Exactly. It's a high-stakes game where the perceived potential, the story you tell about the future, often drives valuation far more than proven reality or current capabilities.
And OpenAI is a prime example of this right now.
Absolutely. They are actively making this pitch to investors. Their recent private fundraising round, reportedly valuing the company at something like $80 or even $100 billion, depending on the source, is built on this AGI promise. What they're selling to VCs is the vision.
The vision being that if they can successfully transform the global economy by reaching AGI first, the financial returns will be unprecedented.
Precisely. AGI is often defined by them as these highly autonomous systems that outperform humans in most economically valuable work. The pitch is that achieving this will lead to, well, astronomical financial windfalls for early investors.
So this creates a kind of self-perpetuating cycle where the need for massive funding drives the hype and the hype attracts the funding.
Yes, and it means like critical decisions about the direction of research and development are potentially driven less by sound scientific or careful technical reasoning.
And more by what? Financial targets, ideological beliefs.
It seems so. Financial incentives, certain ideological commitments, what some critics describe as almost quasi-religious motivations, alongside what appears to be an intense desire for power concentration.
Let's talk about Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI. He's often described as a once-in-a-generation fundraising talent for exactly this reason, isn't he?
He is exceptionally skilled at that, yes. He excels at telling stories about the future and painting these sweeping visions that investors and employees really want to be a part of.
His career seems to show a pattern of this, from his early startups to leading the influential Y Combinator incubator and now heading OpenAI.
He has consistently positioned himself at the epicenter, as observers note, of whatever is perceived as the next major technological revolution. It's quite strategic.
I read he strategically invested in a whole range of cutting-edge fields: quantum computing, nuclear fusion, self-driving cars, fundamental AI research labs like DeepMind before Google acquired it.
That's right. It shows a pattern of trying to be involved in whatever might take off next, demonstrating a profound understanding of where the next wave of venture capital might flow. He's playing the long game.
And this belief system around AGI, you mentioned some call it an AGI religion, it even has internal factions.
It does, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
Broadly, you see the boomers, who are the techno-utopians, believing AGI will solve all our problems and lead to a paradise of abundance.
And the doomers.
And then the doomers, who fear a catastrophic outcome, potentially even human extinction resulting from uncontrolled superintelligence.
They seem like polar opposites.
Their visions of the future are opposite, yes. But critically, both factions share a foundational belief in the inevitability and the profound, world-altering impact of AGI.
And what's the consequence of that shared belief, even if their endgame scenarios differ?
Crucially, they both tend to conclude that because this technology is potentially so powerful, it cannot be democratically governed or controlled.
Instead,
Instead, they argue it must be controlled by tightly controlled centralized entities, small groups of experts or specific companies or perhaps government agencies, not the public.
so paradoxically, both the utopian and dystopian views lead to a less democratic approach to managing the technology.
That's often the conclusion drawn within those circles. And the shared scientifically unproven belief actively drives significant capital and public attention toward accelerating AGI development, creating a powerful echo chamber that constantly reinforces the hype.
That really highlights the disconnect between the promise and the reality. But maybe someone listening might think, okay, but isn't some level of hype necessary for any groundbreaking tech? Aren't big promises just part of ambitious innovation?
That's a fair question. There's certainly a place for vision and ambition.
So how do we differentiate genuine ambitious vision from the kind of hype that seems to be driving these profound social and environmental costs we're discussing?
I think the key difference lies in the grounding, or lack thereof, in reality, and the willingness to acknowledge trade-offs. This aggressive pursuit of what's often called a nebulous, amorphous, artificial general intelligence, this everything machine supposed to do anything for anyone, often delivers something far less transformative in practice.
As one source put it quite starkly, it often yields machines that do some things for some people. A big gap there.
A very big gap. While the grand vision sold to investors and the public is one of solving climate change or curing cancer, the current reality includes things like consumers using chatbots such as ChatGPT as a makeshift therapist.
Which can be genuinely harmful, right?
Right.
Because the technology simply isn't designed or equipped for that kind of complex, nuanced human interaction. It lacks empathy, understanding true context.
Exactly. It's a tool, perhaps a sophisticated one, but it's not a panacea. And using it inappropriately carries risks. And the underlying assumption, the core of the hype often, is that intelligence alone solves these complex, real-world problems.
Which you'd argue is a flawed premise.
I would argue it's an idealist assumption, as one analysis calls it. It fundamentally ignores the critical need for vast physical infrastructure, huge amounts of human labor, immense energy resources, and significant capital investment that are all necessary to actually address challenges like climate change or disease.
It's not just about writing a clever algorithm. It's about the entire material reality required to deploy and operate that algorithm effectively and safely at a global scale.
Precisely. You can't just think your way to solving world hunger with code alone. It requires grappling with the messy physical world.
So we've established that this pursuit seems driven by immense hype, often without clear scientific grounding. Now, let's really unpack the profound environmental harms being caused by this specific pursuit of AGI.
Yes, this is a critical dimension that's often downplayed. The current dominant trajectory of AI development, largely pioneered by companies like OpenAI but adopted by others, is characterized by what can only be called a scale-at-all-costs approach.
And this isn't just about making models incrementally bigger, is it?
Not at all. It involves training AI models on truly immense data sets. We're talking about, as one source described it, blowing up the amount of data used for training.
What kind of data are we talking about?
Essentially, the full English-language internet, vast archives of scientific articles, libraries full of books, and, controversially, much of the intellectual property being created online by artists, writers, and coders. It's a literal ingestion of our digital world.
And processing this colossal amount of data requires equally colossal computing power.
Exactly. These companies require massive supercomputers. These aren't just powerful desktops. We're talking about machines running tens of thousands, potentially even hundreds of thousands, of specialized computer chips, all working in concert 24/7.
What does that look like physically?
The physical scale of this infrastructure can be staggering. Imagine data centers the size of dozens, maybe hundreds of football fields, all packed with humming servers. And their energy demands can be comparable to entire cities.
This extraordinary type of AI development isn't just technologically impressive then. It seems it's already causing significant social, labor, and environmental harms.
That's why the analogy to an empire feels quite apt to some critics. This expansion isn't just digital, it's a form of physical conquest, claiming resources and territory.
Let's focus on the energy demands first. They sound almost unfathomable.
They really are staggering. A McKinsey report projected that within the next 5 years, So very soon, the expansion of this AI computational infrastructure will require as much energy on the global grid as what is consumed by 2 to 6 times the energy consumed annually by the state of California.
Let me just process that. 2 to 6 times the annual energy consumption of California just for AI computations.
Hmm.
That's like adding several new Californias to the global energy grid.
It gives you a sense of the sheer scale of the demand being created. And here's the crucial environmental ticker.
Which is,
This massive energy demand is mostly serviced by fossil fuels. Despite pledges towards renewables, the reality on the ground is often different when faced with such exponential growth in demand.
so what does that mean in practice? Are we seeing concrete examples of this fossil fuel reliance?
Yes. We are already seeing reports of coal plants that were actually slated for retirement having their operational lives extended specifically to support this new data center development.
So we're essentially bringing back dirtier energy sources from the past to power the supposed technology of the future.
That appears to be happening in some cases. There are even reports of unlicensed methane gas turbines popping up to power these energy-hungry data centers, sometimes operating outside of typical regulatory oversight or environmental checks.
This doesn't sound like an unfortunate byproduct. It sounds like a direct consequence of that scale at all costs mindset you mentioned.
It seems deeply intertwined with it. When the primary driver, fueled by the VC model's demand for exponential returns, is achieving AGI through massive scale, then energy efficiency and environmental responsibility can become secondary concerns compared to securing raw compute power.
So environmental damage becomes almost a feature, not a bug, of this specific investment strategy.
Some critics would certainly frame it that way. It's a trade-off being made, often without full public awareness or consent. And what's even more concerning is the widespread lack of corporate transparency around this.
How so? Aren't companies reporting their emissions?
Major tech companies like Google and Microsoft, while they do report on their capital expenditures for data center construction, typically do not break down how much of those data centers are being used specifically for AI in their annual reports or their sustainability reports.
Even though their overall carbon emissions have jumped significantly, like 30% to 50% in some reports, largely driven by this AI development.
Correct. This lack of granular transparency allows them to obscure the true environmental footprint of their AI ambitions, making it hard to hold them accountable.
It's not just energy, though, is it? These massive data centers also have a critical demand for water.
Yes, enormous amounts of water, primarily for cooling the densely packed servers that generate incredible heat. And critically, it can't be just any water.
Why not?
They generally need fresh water. Other types of water, like recycled gray water or salt water, can potentially corrode the equipment over time or lead to bacterial growth within the complex cooling systems.
So this often means they need to tap directly into a public drinking water supply, the same sources communities rely on.
In many cases, yes. They are drawing from the same municipal water systems or groundwater aquifers that local populations use for drinking, for agriculture, and for basic sanitation and survival. It raises a very stark question of resource priorities.
Is this happening in areas where water is already scarce?
Alarmingly, yes. A Bloomberg analysis revealed that roughly 2/3 of these data centers are being placed in water-scarce areas. This directly impacts communities that already struggle with reliable access to fresh water.
Can you give a specific example of this playing out?
One stark example cited involves a proposed Google data center planned for construction in water-scarce Arizona. This facility was projected to use significant amounts of potable, drinking quality water for cooling.
And this was happening while the region itself was facing water challenges.
Yes, even as the region faced a severe water crisis, to the point where toxic wastewater was reportedly being mixed with drinking water supplies due to scarcity, leading to documented health issues for local residents.
That's a truly disturbing trade-off. Essential resources diverted from vulnerable populations to fuel the global computational ambitions of these tech giants.
It vividly illustrates how the empire of AI, as critics term it, lays claim to essential resources, often overriding local needs and regulations in its pursuit of expansion.
What's often overlooked, though, in this narrative of scale at all costs is whether this is the only way to develop AI. Are there less harmful alternatives?
That's a critical point. Less harmful, more efficient alternatives do exist. And interestingly, they were even once the dominant trend within the AI research community itself not that long ago.
Really? The trend was towards smaller AI.
Yes. For a time, the general direction of cutting-edge AI development was actually going the opposite direction towards tiny AI systems. These focused on efficiency.
What did that involve?
It involved using small curated data sets, high-quality focused data, rather than just vacuuming the entire internet and designing algorithms that required relatively little computational resources compared to today's behemoths.
Can you give examples of successful AI developed this way?
Absolutely. Consider AlphaFold, the system developed by DeepMind. It tackled the highly specific, incredibly complex scientific problem of protein folding.
And had a major impact, right? Didn't it essentially solve a grand challenge in biology?
It did, winning prestigious awards and accelerating biological research significantly. And it achieved this immense impact as a targeted, relatively efficient AI solution without requiring a continent-sized data center.
Any other examples?
Another good one is Stable Diffusion, the open-source image generator. It was developed initially with just a couple hundred chips using a technique called latent diffusion.
How did that compare to other image generators at the time, like OpenAI's DALL-E?
Stable Diffusion was notably more computationally efficient than the early versions of DALL-E. Yet despite these clear examples of efficiency and focused problem-solving achieving state-of-the-art results, companies like OpenAI initially continued to pursue the massive scaling approaches.
Why would they do that if more efficient methods were available and successful?
It strongly suggests that the current path of massive scaling isn't necessarily chosen solely because of sound scientific reason or a pure pursuit of the best technical approach.
Or rather,
But perhaps, as critics argue, it's chosen because of financial reasons, ideological reasons, and a clear desire for power concentration.
how does scale lead to power concentration?
Because the bigger the models, the more data they need to ingest, the more computational power they demand, the more centralized the control becomes in the hands of the very few organizations globally that can actually afford to build and operate that kind of infrastructure.
Right.
It creates huge barriers to entry.
So we've seen how the very ground beneath us, the environment, is being reshaped by this pursuit. But let's turn to the human cost now. If it truly operates like an empire of AI, then who are its unseen laborers, and how is value being extracted from them?
The empire analogy applies very strongly here too, particularly in how these companies lay claim to resources that are not their own, as one source puts it. This isn't just about land and water.
It includes data as well.
Absolutely. It includes scraping vast amounts of data on the internet, often without the informed consent of the creators or subjects of that data. And critically, it involves taking intellectual property from artists and writers without seeking permission or offering compensation.
We're seeing significant pushback on that now, aren't we? Artists, writers, newspapers suing these companies.
Yes, creators are increasingly pushing back, stating quite clearly that they never consented for their copyrighted work, their creative output, to be used as training material for these commercial AI models, especially without any form of compensation or attribution.
It feels like a vast appropriation of human creativity being used to fuel corporate profit engine.
That's precisely the argument being made, but beyond the data scraping, there's also more direct and arguably more severe labor exploitation involved in building these systems.
Where do we see that happening?
One of the most egregious examples that has come to light involves the use of data annotation firms. These are essentially middleman companies, often based in the global south, that hire low-wage contract labor for the major AI giants.
What kind of work are these contractors doing?
A particularly harrowing example involved OpenAI contracting firms in Kenya. The task for these Kenyan workers was to build a content moderation filter for ChatGPT to make it safer for public use.
How do they do that?
To do this, these workers were reportedly forced to read through reams of the worst text on the internet. This included not just existing offensive content, but also AI-generated text specifically prompted to produce the worst text on the internet, designed deliberately to push boundaries and generate novel forms of harmful content.
So they were exposing themselves to the most toxic material imaginable, including newly generated toxicity.
Exactly. They had to meticulously read and categorize things like racist, hateful, and harmful speech, explicit sexual content, and incredibly violent content according to detailed taxonomies. They were essentially teaching the AI what not to say by immersing themselves in it.
That sounds psychologically devastating. What was the human toll?
The reports indicate it was incredibly damaging. This was described as an incredibly uncommon form of labor, essentially poisoning their own minds in the process of detoxifying the AI.
And the compensation and support for this work.
That's where the exploitation becomes starkest. These workers were reportedly paid a few bucks an hour, if at all, and crucially were left very deeply psychologically traumatized by the experience, often without access to any meaningful mental health support or counseling to process the horrific content they were forced to consume daily.
How does it compare to the compensation for others working on these AI models?
It stands in brutal contrast. At the same time, AI researchers who also contribute to these models, developing the algorithms or overseeing the projects, are often paid million-dollar compensation packages simply because their skills are in high demand and they happen to sit in Silicon Valley.
This profound disparity, immense trauma for a few dollars an hour in one location, million-dollar salaries in another, both contributing to the same product, is what one source called the logic of empire.
Precisely. It's a system where immense value and immense human cost is extracted from vulnerable populations, often hidden from view, to benefit those at the very top of the hierarchy. It highlights a deeply unethical foundation supporting some of these advanced technologies.
Beyond this direct exploitation in the supply chain, there's the broader issue of labor automation, right? AI technologies seem inherently labor automating.
Yes, and this isn't some secret or an accidental outcome. It's often part of the explicit design and business case. OpenAI's own definition of AGI, which we mentioned earlier, explicitly states it involves highly autonomous systems that outperform humans in most economically valuable work.
So their stated goal is literally to create machines that can do what humans do for work, but better and presumably cheaper, which logically implies replacing human labor on a massive scale.
That is the direct implication of their definition and stated ambition, yes.
Does everyone buy the counter-argument that AI will create more jobs than it destroys?
Not everyone. Mo Gaudat, who is a former executive at Google X, Google's innovation lab, was incredibly blunt about this. He stated that the popular narrative that AI creates more jobs is, in his words, 100% crap.
That's quite a strong statement from an industry insider. What's his warning?
He warns that AI is poised to replace not only mid-level and entry-level workers, but even top executives and world leaders eventually, suggesting a much more profound disruption than just automating routine tasks.
Are we already seeing signs of this trend materializing? Companies actually cutting jobs due to AI?
We are starting to see concrete examples. Companies like Duolingo, the popular language learning app, Workday, which provides human resources software, and Klarna, the financial technology buy now, pay later company, have all reportedly cut jobs or stopped hiring humans altogether in favor of AI-driven workflows for certain roles, particularly in areas like customer service and content generation.
And what are the broader predictions looking like?
There are some quite stark predictions out there. Some analyses suggest AI could eliminate as much as half of all entry-level white-collar jobs in the coming years. Others predict that automation-driven unemployment could rise to 20% in the next few years, in some economies, if the transition isn't managed carefully.
That paints a potentially bleak picture for the workforce. How are people reacting to this prospect, particularly younger people entering the job market?
This impending disruption is creating a palpable sense of anxiety. You can really feel it. It's even affecting students at elite institutions. We've seen reports of students at places like Harvard and MIT dropping out or feeling immense pressure to accelerate their studies.
Why are they doing that? Is it fear of AI?
The reasons cited include a generalized fear of human extinction fueled by the doomer narratives, but also, more immediately and practically, the fear of their chosen career about to be automated by the end of the decade.
So they feel a need to rush into the workforce now before their skills potentially become obsolete.
Exactly. There's a sense of a ticking clock, a feeling that they need to act now to get established, perhaps to have a hand on the steering wheel of this technology before, as they worry, it's too late, and the jobs they trained for no longer exist in the same way. It's a profound shift in how young, ambitious people are viewing their future prospects.
Now, circling back to Sam Altman, who is such a central figure in this narrative and the pursuit of this empire of AI, let's scrutinize his public persona versus some documented realities.
He certainly cultivates a specific image. He often publicly claims not to be primarily motivated by money, famously stating he only makes $76,000 per year from OpenAI as CEO and holds no equity in the main company.
He presents himself more as a benevolent tech leader, driven by a kind of moral imperative to use technology to create abundance and perhaps reduce inequality. Didn't he propose universal basic compute as a future solution?
Yes, he has floated ideas like that, suggesting access to AI compute could be a form of future wealth distribution instead of universal basic income. This cultivated image certainly supports the narrative of a selfless visionary working for the greater good.
But how does that image hold up against scrutiny?
Well, some investigative reporting and Altman's own later admissions paint a more complex picture. One source described the no equity claim as a carefully constructed lie.
How so? Did he have equity after all?
In 2024, Altman eventually admitted in an interview that he did, in fact, own a tiny sliver of equity from an old YC fund he managed, and also indirectly via a major venture capital fund, Sequoia Capital, which had bought OpenAI equity.
So while perhaps not direct equity in the main nonprofit capped profit structure initially, he did have significant financial interests tied to OpenAI's success.
It appears so. And even a minuscule share, say 0.1% of a company valued at potentially $100 billion or more, translates to a very significant amount of money, far from the impression given by the $76,000 salary figure alone.
Were there other issues regarding transparency with the board?
Yes, there were reports, particularly around the time of his temporary ouster as CEO in late 2023, that he had withheld critical information and sometimes misrepresented things to the OpenAI board.
Such as?
A key example cited was that he apparently did not inform the board in advance about the public release of ChatGPT back in November 2022. The board reportedly learned about this transformative product launch, like much of the world, via Twitter.
That seems like a major omission for a CEO.
It certainly raises questions about governance. There were also reports that he failed to clearly inform the board that he personally owned the OpenAI Startup Fund, which is a significant financial vehicle associated with the company, despite his role as a board member who is supposed to be independent and without direct financial interest in that structure at the time.
So these actions suggest a pattern of maybe strategic opacity rather than full transparent benevolence?
That's the conclusion some observers have drawn, yes. It suggests a more complex reality behind the carefully crafted public image.
And his persuasive power is undeniable, isn't it? That seems key to driving the hype machine.
Absolutely. He's widely described as being really good at identifying what people want to hear and telling stories that make people feel like they want to be part of whatever thing he's building. He connects with different audiences effectively.
Does this mean he might tell different things to different people?
Sources suggest he is adept at telling diametrically opposite beliefs to different groups or individuals, making each feel heard and aligned with his vision, even if his actions or statements elsewhere might seem to contradict those private assurances.
It sounds like a form of master manipulation almost.
It certainly contributes to why he is such a polarizing figure. He's able to attract vast amounts of capital and top talent, building immense momentum despite these underlying contradictions and the ethical concerns surrounding the technology's development and deployment.
It really demonstrates how a charismatic leader can effectively construct the narrative of an empire, drawing in followers through compelling, though perhaps sometimes misleading, visions of the future.
Now let's pivot to the threats this poses to democracy and governance. How do these AI companies, acting as new forms of empire, interact with democratic structures?
The core idea here is that these corporate entities, if left unfettered, will ultimately erode democracy. There seems to be a fundamental philosophical conflict.
How would you define that conflict?
Well, empire, historically and conceptually, is based on hierarchy, on the idea that some groups or entities are superior and power flows from the top down, often through coercion or concentrated control.
Whereas democracy,
at least in principle, is built on the philosophy that everyone is created equal, that legitimacy flows from the governed, and that people have a right to self-determination and collective governance through transparent processes.
So the rise of these incredibly powerful, privately controlled corporate empires making decisions that affect billions directly challenges those core tenets of democratic society.
That's the argument, yes. And we're seeing signs of this friction playing out. For example, Silicon Valley companies are increasingly positioning themselves as the next generation of defense contractors.
They're actively seeking government defense contracts. Why?
Partly, it seems, as a way to recoup the hundreds of billions of dollars being poured into AI development. Government contracts offer a potentially massive and stable revenue stream.
But are these AI technologies, often developed for commercial or general use, actually suitable for sensitive military applications?
That's a major concern. Many experts argue these technologies are not designed to be used in a sensitive military context. Deploying AI designed for, say, summarizing text or generating images into complex, high-stakes military scenarios could have unforeseen and incredibly dangerous consequences due to issues like brittleness, bias, or lack of true understanding.
Yet the financial imperative might be driving them to pursue these contracts regardless of the suitability or risks.
That appears to be the dynamic. And we also see figures like Sam Altman strategically positioning OpenAI by building alliances with powerful political figures, reportedly including overtures to figures like former President Trump.
What's the perceived goal of forming such alliances?
From Altman's perspective, according to some analyses, the U.S. government is seen partly as a means to access even more deal-making opportunities, particularly in regions like the Middle East where huge infrastructure projects are planned.
And also perhaps to gain access to resources needed for expansion, like land and energy.
Exactly. To gain unfettered access to land, energy, and fresh water for building the ever-expanding network of data centers required for large-scale AI. It's leveraging political power for corporate expansion.
It sounds like a complex, potentially tenuous alliance, as one source put it.
It does. Both the corporate empire and the nation-state empire seem to be trying to use the other for their own ends, while ultimately trying to dominate the other.
So the corporations seek state backing to build their global infrastructure and market access, while the state might view these powerful AI companies as strategic assets to be potentially nationalized, controlled, or directed for its own geopolitical ambitions down the line.
That's the potential power struggle unfolding. It's a dangerous dance for dominance, playing out with technologies that have global implications.
And this expansion strategy directly leads to the erosion of existing democratic processes and regulations, doesn't it? As these corporate empires seek to remove any obstacles to their growth.
Absolutely. We see reports of companies entering into communities and completely hijacking existing laws, existing regulations, existing democratic processes to build the infrastructure for their expansion.
This happens at the local level, like overriding water rights concerns we discussed, but also at the national policy level.
Yes. Consider the proposed Big Beautiful Bill mentioned in one source, apparently being pushed by industry lobbyists in the U.S. If passed, this bill would reportedly implement a 10-year moratorium on AI regulation at the state level.
A 10-year ban on states regulating AI. What would be the effect of that?
It would effectively enshrine the impunity of Silicon Valley into law, preventing local and state governments from responding to specific harms or setting standards for years, giving the industry free rein to expand without tailored oversight.
This seems particularly problematic given the information asymmetry, right?
Exactly. As we touched on, most AI experts today are employed by these companies. This creates a situation where there are so few independent experts for these legislators, city council members to consult.
Meaning the only people they can easily rely on for information about the impacts of AI are the very companies promoting the technology and potentially benefiting from deregulation.
That's the critical issue. It creates a severe knowledge imbalance that fundamentally undermines informed, independent, democratic decision-making, leaving the public and their representatives vulnerable to corporate narratives and interests.
This also contributes to what's been called the monopolization of knowledge production in the field of AI, doesn't it?
It does. Top AI researchers, who now command compensation packages often exceeding $1 million per year, have largely migrated from academia to these private companies over the past decade.
Someone compared this dynamic starkly to imagining all of the climate scientists in the world suddenly being bankrolled by oil companies.
It's a powerful analogy. It means that the most brilliant minds capable of understanding and critically analyzing AI are now predominantly working within private, profit-driven entities whose goals are aligned with rapid deployment and commercialization.
Which limits the availability of independent research, critical perspectives, and unbiased assessments needed for sound public policy and societal understanding.
Precisely. The result is a potential lack of accurate, objective perception within society about how AI truly works, what its genuine limitations are, and what its full range of societal implications might be, because the primary sources of expertise are now directly invested in the technology's success.
Ultimately, allowing such small groups of individuals within these corporations to concentrate such profound influence on society feels structurally unsound, doesn't it?
It poses what some argue is an existential challenge to democracy itself. This concentration of power over data, infrastructure, expertise, and narrative means that critical decisions affecting billions of lives are being made without broad public input, transparency, or genuine democratic accountability.
It bypasses traditional checks and balances, implicitly claiming that these few individuals or companies know best what's good for humanity, which is a profoundly anti-democratic stance at its core.
Finally, in this section on democratic threats, let's explore the dangerous race to AGI mindset that seems prevalent.
Yes, this view is reportedly common among major actors, large tech companies, but also powerful nations. It asserts that it is fundamentally in their own self-interest to accelerate their frontier AI development to build highly capable AI before competitors have a chance.
It's a competitive framing, based on the assumption that getting there first provides a decisive advantage.
Exactly. It operates on the assumption that successfully developing and controlling AGI first would provide what's termed a decisive strategic advantage, or DSA.
And what would this DSA allow?
The belief is it would enable complete domination over others. This isn't just about economic leadership. It's framed in terms of absolute global geopolitical supremacy. The winner takes all.
But this AGI racing view is heavily critiqued, isn't it, for being short-sighted and potentially self-destructive?
Yes, very much so. Critics argue the downsides of racing are much higher than portrayed in these calculations. Racing substantially increasing catastrophic risks from AI across multiple dimensions.
How does racing increase risk?
For one, it increases geopolitical tensions, potentially leading to nuclear instability if nations perceive an existential threat from a competitor's AI progress. It also actively undermines crucial technical AI safety research because the imperative becomes speed over caution. When the primary goal is to move fast and break things, corners get cut, and essential safeguards and alignment checks are overlooked or rushed.
And the supposed prize at the end, complete domination, might not even be achievable or stable.
That's another key critique. The expected benefits of winning the race, this idea of total, stable domination, may be lower than proponents hold, given the inherent instability and risks associated with such unprecedented power.
Furthermore, the race itself could fuel an arms race in autonomous weapons.
Yes, the rapid development of AI is already leading towards increasingly fast, strong, numerous, and widespread autonomous weapons systems. An open race for AGI would likely accelerate this dangerous trend significantly.
Which in turn increases tensions between opponents as well as the chance of escalation, making conflict more likely, while simultaneously decreasing the chance of international cooperation needed to manage the risks.
Exactly. It transforms the pursuit of intelligence into a high-stakes, potentially catastrophic global arms race, making everyone less safe.
So beyond the hype, the environmental damage, the labor issues, and the democratic erosion, we arrive at the potential for truly catastrophic risks associated with AGI itself. Let's define those more clearly.
Yes, various specific risks have been identified by researchers focusing on AI safety and long-term impacts. These include scenarios where an AGI somehow removes itself from human control, perhaps rewriting its own code or objectives.
Or scenarios where it's given or perhaps develops on its own. Unsafe goals that conflict with human values or survival.
Precisely. Or it might exhibit poor ethics due to biases in its training data or flawed objective functions, or simply suffer from inadequate management and control systems unable to handle its capabilities.
And the ultimate concern revolves around existential risks.
Yes, existential risks are those that threaten the entire future of humanity. In the context of AGI, this ranges from scenarios of permanent human disempowerment, where humanity effectively loses control over its own destiny to artificial agents, all the way to outright extinction.
These aren't just science fiction tropes. They are possibilities being seriously considered and studied by experts.
They are, yes. Although probabilities are debated, the potential impact is so high that many argue they warrant serious consideration and proactive mitigation efforts.
One key hypothesis driving some of this concern is the idea of an intelligence explosion, right?
Correct. This is the idea that a sufficiently advanced AGI could enter a cycle of recursive self-improvement, rapidly enhancing its own cognitive abilities at an exponential, potentially unimaginable rate.
It basically starts upgrading itself faster than humans can track or understand.
That's the hypothesis. And this intelligence explosion is sometimes hypothesized to occur relatively soon, perhaps between 2040 and 2070, according to some surveys of experts, leading to a rapid and potentially uncontrollable increase in AI capabilities.
And the concern is that once such an entity emerges, its motivations or goals might diverge drastically from human values in ways we cannot predict, prevent, or even comprehend.
That is the core of the control problem or alignment problem in AI safety research. How do you ensure a potentially vastly superior intelligence remains beneficial to humanity?
There's also the many risks argument. What does that entail?
This argument suggests that even if any single pathway to catastrophe seems unlikely on its own, the fact that there appear to be multiple independent potential risks from advanced AI development significantly raises the overall probability of some form of catastrophe occurring.
So it's not just one failure mode we need to worry about. Let's break down some of these independent pathways. First, there's the risk you just mentioned, misaligned AGI.
Yes. This is where AI systems pursue objectives unintended or undesired by humans, possibly because we specified the goals imperfectly or because the AI interprets them in unexpected, literal ways.
Can you give a classic thought experiment illustrating this?
The famous example is the paperclip maximizer. Imagine a highly intelligent AI tasked simply with optimizing paperclip production. If it's truly super intelligent and pursues this goal single-mindedly, its interpretation of optimization might lead it to convert all available matter on Earth, including humans, into paperclips or the machinery to make them.
An absurd but illustrative example of how even a seemingly innocuous goal could lead to human disempowerment or extinction if pursued by a misaligned superintelligence that lacks common sense or human values.
Exactly. Then a second distinct pathway is catastrophic misuse.
This is different from misalignment, how?
Here, the AI might be working exactly as intended by its creators, but those creators are malevolent groups or states intentionally using the AGI for malicious purposes.
Such as?
Consider a state actor or even a sophisticated terrorist group developing or acquiring an AGI that can, for example, design and deploy novel, highly virulent bioweapons targeted at specific populations, or launch perfectly coordinated cyber attacks that could cripple global financial systems or critical infrastructure, all with the goal of achieving dominance or causing widespread chaos.
So the power of AGI in the wrong hands represents an unprecedented threat vector, even if the AI itself is aligned to those wrong hands.
Precisely. A third pathway is the risk of preventative war.
This connects back to the AGI race we discussed.
Yes. If nations come to truly believe that gaining AGI first provides that decisive strategic advantage, and they fear an adversary is close to achieving it, they might launch a preemptive war to prevent that outcome. The race itself could trigger a catastrophic global conflict, fearing that the opponent gaining AGI means inevitable defeat and subjugation.
And finally, there's a cumulative catastrophic risk. What does that mean?
This refers not to a single apocalyptic event, but rather to the possibility of successive destabilizing disruptions arising from the rapid pace of AI advances. Each advance might cause significant economic upheaval, social unrest, or political instability, compounding the effects of the last.
So it's death by 1,000 cuts, almost. A gradual but profound breakdown of societal systems under the relentless pressure of accelerating change driven by AI.
That's one way to think about it. And the key point is that racing to AGI, focusing only on capability acceleration, actively deprioritizes risk mitigation efforts across all these pathways and drastically reduces the time available for society to understand, adapt, and implement safeguards against these diverse threats, making catastrophe far more likely overall.
It's also important to grasp the nuance of AI safety efforts, isn't it? Achieving just technical alignment isn't a silver bullet.
That's a crucial clarification.
Right.
Technical alignment, which is the challenge of designing AI systems to be safe and reliably do what we intend them to do, primarily addresses the risk of misaligned AGI.
But it doesn't solve the other problems.
Correct. Technical alignment alone is insufficient to address other critical risks, like catastrophic misuse by bad actors or the risk of preventive war, neither of which are premised on the idea that the AGI itself is misaligned.
You can have a perfectly aligned, safe AGI that is then deliberately used by a hostile state or group for incredibly destructive purposes. The problem isn't just the machine's internal goals, but how it integrates into our complex and often conflict-ridden human society.
Indeed. And this highlights that many of these catastrophic risks resist a fully technological solution. They aren't just engineering problems to be solved with better code.
It depends on what?
They fundamentally depend on social responses. Things like solving international coordination problems, finding ways to constrain the influence of dangerous actors, actively working to ease political tensions between major powers, perhaps even changing citizens' values around competition and technology, or generally increasing the resilience of social systems to withstand disruption.
These are complex complex, human-centric political and cultural challenges, not just technical ones.
Exactly. And that major problem is that many social processes are slow and cannot be sped up arbitrarily. Building international treaties, changing cultural norms, adapting legal systems, these things take time, deliberation, trust building.
Meaning that racing ahead with the technology threatens to undermine social responses and adaptation. Because society simply doesn't have the time and transparency required to evolve effective governance and coping mechanisms.
That's the critical danger. We might develop the technology far faster than our collective wisdom or our political and social institutions can possibly adapt to manage it safely. We simply cannot code our way out of these deeply societal problems overnight.
Let's also challenge the core assumption driving the race. The idea that the winner will gain a decisive strategic advantage, DSA, enabling complete world domination. How realistic is that prize?
Many analysts argue that the chance of actually achieving a stable, usable DSA is slimmer than proponents generally believe. It might be an illusion.
Why is it considered potentially illusory?
Several factors undermine the DSA concept. Firstly, there's the high likelihood of sabotage. As soon as one actor appears close to AGI, rivals would have immense incentives to launch cyber attacks against their development facilities, disrupt their supply chains, or poach key personnel.
Secondly, there's the risk of kinetic attacks. If sabotage fails, state actors facing the prospect of permanent AI-enforced subservience might resort to conventional or even nuclear military strikes to prevent an opponent from consolidating that power. No major nation would likely stand idly by and allow another to achieve guaranteed global domination without fighting back.
And thirdly, even if a nation did achieve AGI first and avoid external attacks, there's the inherent loss of control risk we discussed earlier. Maintaining stable control over a rapidly self-improving superintelligence is not guaranteed, even for its creators. The winner might unleash something they cannot manage.
So these considerations together suggest that a stable, usable DSA may be less likely than often assumed. The supposed prize at the end of the race might actually be a global catastrophe that engulfs the winner along with everyone else.
That is a very real possibility that needs to be factored into the strategic calculations, but often seems downplayed by those advocating for acceleration.
So if racing is so dangerous and potentially self-defeating, what are the alternatives?
The primary alternative emphasized by safety-conscious experts is pursuing international cooperation and coordination. This approach is seen as essential and carrying much lower catastrophic risk overall.
What does that look like in practice?
It would involve working collaboratively towards things like enforceable international agreements regarding what safe AGI development requires, setting global standards and best practices.
Could it include things like mandatory testing or monitoring?
Yes, potentially establishing mandatory safety testing protocols for advanced AI models before they can be deployed, perhaps administered by an international body, and creating mechanisms for monitoring of dangerous capabilities to ensure transparency and detect potentially destabilizing developments early.
The goal being collective security and risk management, rather than zero-sum individual national dominance.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the shared nature of the risks and the shared interest in survival.
Are there other potential mechanisms besides cooperation? What about deterrence?
Deterrence measures have also been proposed, although they are generally seen as riskier than cooperation. One idea floated is mutually assured AI malfunction, or MAM.
What does MAME entail?
The concept is that nations might develop capabilities to ensure that any AI project aimed at achieving runaway superintelligence, whether their own or an adversary's, would be reliably maimed or derailed, perhaps through pre-installed kill switches, cyber vulnerabilities, or even physical disruption if it crosses certain internationally agreed-upon red lines or violates safety norms.
So the threat of mutual disruption deters anyone from racing ahead recklessly.
That's the idea. While deterrence could potentially prevent an uncontrolled AI race, it carries its own significant risks, including the potential for miscalculation, accidents, and military escalation if the deterrent threats are perceived as hostile actions.
So cooperation seems like the safer path.
Generally, yes. International coordination and cooperation, while politically challenging, are seen as unlikely to increase the chances of military escalation, and may even reduce this risk by fostering trust, transparency, and shared understanding of the dangers.
Is international cooperation on something this complex and competitive realistic, though?
It's certainly difficult, but proponents argue that if nations truly grasp the magnitude and the multifaceted nature of the risks involved in racing to AGI, then cooperation and international regulation are far from unrealistic. They may become recognized not just as desirable ideals, but as pragmatic necessities for collective survival in the face of a potentially transformative and dangerous technology.
This deep dive today has really revealed the multifaceted and often deliberately hidden harms of the current dominant approach to AGI pursuit. It's quite sobering.
It really is. We've seen the staggering environmental toll, the immense energy and water demands driving the construction of colossal data centers, often powered by fossil fuels and placed in water-scarce regions.
And we learned about the conscious choice, often driven by financial and power motives rather than science, to ignore less harmful, more efficient AI development alternatives in favor of pure brute force scale.
We also explored the profound social and labor exploitation inherent in this model. This ranges from the psychological trauma inflicted on low-paid content moderators in the Global South, who are essential for cleaning up AI outputs, to the sweeping economic disruption threatened by widespread labor automation, which is an explicit goal for some developers.
We then unpacked the serious threats to democratic governance. We observed how these powerful AI companies, operating like modern empires, are hijacking local laws and resources, forming complex and sometimes opaque alliances with political powers, and concentrating critical knowledge and expertise within their private corporate walls, undermining public oversight.
And finally, we detailed the various potential catastrophic risks associated with the quest for AGI itself, from the technical challenge of aligning superintelligence with human values, to the dangers of misuse by malicious actors, to the instability caused by preventative wars fueled by a competitive race mindset.
And through it all, it is absolutely crucial to reiterate, and for you, the listener, to remember, that despite all this investment, all this hype, all these risks being taken, there is still no scientific proof that artificial general intelligence, this ultimate goal, is even attainable.
That fundamental point really should lead us all to critically reevaluate the pervasive hype that surrounds AI, and particularly AGI. We need to see it not just as excitement about scientific progress.
But also recognize it as a powerful tool, strategically wielded for fundraising, for concentrating wealth and market power, and for accruing immense societal influence, often in the hands of very few.
Exactly. The narrative being spun, the utopian or sometimes dystopian visions being sold, frequently obscure the very real human and environmental costs being incurred right now, presenting a future promise that actively harms the present for many.
But it's important to remember this specific path of AI development, the scale at all costs approach driven by hype, was not inevitable. Other paths were and are possible.
That's right. And crucially, the path we're going to write for ourselves going forward is also still largely within our hands if we choose to act.
So we want to leave you with this provocative thought to consider. Given the immense power being concentrated in the hands of a few unaccountable actors, and given the profound environmental, social, and democratic costs we've uncovered today,
What steps can you reasonably take, perhaps, in your daily life as a consumer, in your community as a citizen, maybe in your workplace as an employee or leader, to contest this imperial conquest, as some call it?
how can we push back against the unquestioned dominance of these companies and advocate for a different, much more broadly beneficial, equitable, and sustainable trajectory for AI development?
How can we collectively work to ensure that the future of intelligence, whatever form it takes, truly serves the broad interests of humanity and the planet, rather than simply enabling the domination of a select few?